Will the market go up or down? Should you lock in or float? Find out this and more with Master of the Markets, hosted by Barry Habib of MBS Highway. Brought to you by Planet Home Lending. Secured by private equity, Planet Home Lending might just be the largest wholesale lender you've never heard of. Our competitive pricing opens the door, but we know it's our knowledgeable and accessible account executives who will make Planet Home Lending your first and last look on every loan.
Welcome to another edition of Master of the Markets. I'm Barry Habib at MBS Highway. This is created exclusively for Mortgage News Network, brought to you by Planet Home Lending. Hey, last week was exciting with the Fed. Let's talk about it for a minute here. So the Fed made a really important announcement. Now, clearly, they didn't touch interest rates, but I think they did something much more meaningful. They finally said, okay, this enormous balance sheet that we have of $4.5 trillion, we're going to start to unwind it. So I want to talk to you about that and break that down for you because this is meaningful in my opinion. Now, they said they're going to start in October, right around the corner. So usually the Fed's been kind of kicking things down the road and postponing things. And maybe because of the storms, we thought they potentially could have been a bit more hesitant. But the Fed really looks like they mean business this time. And they're going to unwind their balance sheet. Now, I think it's a bit Pollyannish to think that they could really get the balance sheet down to a very low or normal level, and I'll show you why in a minute. There's $4.5 trillion on their balance sheet. This is money created out of thin air to purchase bonds. $2.7 trillion of that is treasuries. $1.8 trillion is mortgage-backed securities. And because they did this through QE1, QE2, QE Lite, QE3, they did all of these things to bring interest rates down, and they successfully did it. They also did it to prop up asset prices in the stock market. That's successful. So what's going to happen now with the Fed unwinding? Well, they're going to try and do this gradually, and let's talk specifically about what's happening in the mortgage bond world, because that affects us directly. Now, quantitative tightening, when you think about what's going to be going on here, first of all, what's the little known secret is that the Fed is still buying mortgage bonds. Even though QE1, 2, Lite, and 3 are over, they're currently buying $25 billion or so a month of mortgage bonds. How do they do that? Well, when somebody pays a mortgage off, and when somebody refinances, somebody sells their home and that mortgage gets paid, and even all of those principal portions of the payments, which amounts to an awful lot of money, comes in, instead of the Fed reducing what they're holding and letting things naturally come off or amortize, the Fed's taking that amount of money and reinvesting it to the tune of $25 billion a month. They're the largest purchaser of mortgage bonds out there. So if the Fed were to stop here cold turkey, well, then we'd see a big disruption. So what they're going to try and do is make this a gradual easing off of the pedal. Now, people think the Fed is going to be selling. They're not selling, okay? They're just going to be buying less. How much less? Starting October, the reduction will be $4 billion a month. So in other words, instead of buying $25 billion, they'll buy $21 billion. In January, what will happen is, so it'll be $4 billion for October, November, December. In January, they're going to cut back a little further. They're going to cut back by $8 billion. So that means they'll be buying, I'm hesitant to say only $17 billion. I mean, it sounds crazy, but yeah, they'll reduce it to $17 billion. And then in April, they'll cut that reduction, or increase the reduction, I should say, to $12 billion, means they'll be purchasing about 13. In July, they'll step it again to now be purchasing $9 billion, and eventually they're going to hit a target of $20 billion. Now, while they're doing this, they're going to be doing the same thing with treasuries, and if you multiply it by 1.5 times on the treasuries, that's exactly what they'll be doing. So they're going to be reducing their purchases of mortgage backs by $20 billion and treasuries by $30 billion. So they'll be buying $50 billion less. They'll still be buying, but a lot less than they were. And what would that do to their balance sheet? Well, what that means as far as their balance sheet goes, now they've got, again, speaking just to mortgage bonds, $1.8 trillion. They've got $2.7 trillion in addition to this in treasuries. So the first year, because it's kind of staircased up, they're going to get rid of $120 billion off their balance sheet, because naturally things will roll off now. Things will amortize. They're not going to be buying back everything that's running off. So their balance sheet will drop from $1.8 trillion to $1.68. In 2019, if they stay with the program, they'll take off another 240. That's 20 billion a month less, so now it's 240. They'll come off, and you could see the drop off to get to a level that the Fed wants to get to. It'll take till 2025. And here's why I think it's Pollyannish, and here's why I really think it's kind of unrealistic that this is going to happen. Because when we think about the United States expansion, we're in the 9th year of an expansion. In other words, no recession for 9 years. We've never really gone in excess of 10 years without a recession. Recessions are cyclical. And even if we were able to go 11 years or 12 years, not see a recession, as soon as we do eventually hit a recession, what do you think the Fed's going to do? They don't have a lot of room to cut rates, so they're going to potentially and probably go back to their old tools and go back to quantitative easing, which means they'll start buying mortgage bonds, start buying treasuries again, and I don't think they're ever going to get rid of the balance sheet. I just don't think that it's going to be potentially viable to get from here till 2025, 8 more years or 17 years without a recession. So that's kind of the way we're thinking. Okay, this week, a lot of housing data, and the housing data has been strong. Don't be confused when you see the media come out and say, oh, well, sales are off. Sales are off a little bit at times because of a lack of inventory, not because of lack of demand. You know, in the latest report from last week, we see that 51% of homes are selling in less than 28 days. It's amazing how quickly things are going off the shelves if they're priced correctly. You know, there's a lot of homes, as you know, that are unrealistically priced. People put flyers out there to say, hey, look, I'll put it up for this much. If I get it, great. Otherwise, I won't move. And a lot of times, how do people price their homes? It's not to the market. It's to, hey, here's what I owe on the home, and here's how much I want as a down payment, and here's what I need for closing costs. So I'll price it for this much, okay? That has nothing to do with the market. Wouldn't it be interesting if you had Apple stock and you tried to price Apple stock that way, okay? You can't do it that way. You have to do it in accordance with what the market is. And those homes that are priced according to the market are flying off the shelves. So we're going to get a lot of housing data, and then at the end of the week, we're going to get the Fed's favored measured gauge of inflation, the PCE, or personal consumption expenditure. That could move the markets if there's some inflation out there. So look, what does this all mean with the Fed? It really means that all other things equal, with less buying from the Fed, over the next year you can anticipate rates to move gradually a little bit higher. So that's an opportunity right now for your customers to take advantage of this. Now look, it doesn't mean that rates go up in a straight line. It doesn't mean they can't go down from here. There's a lot of wild cards out here. Heaven forbid bad stuff happens with North Korea. Iran started to talk about things now. If something happens along those lines, heaven forbid, it would send shocks to the stock market. Money would flow into bonds. Rates would drop, probably push us into recession. You know, these are all wild cards that are out there. But for now, everything else equal, the trend would be, if you take the largest buyer out, other buyers will, of course, step in. But to incent them, you'd have to give them higher yields in order to bring them out. So expect a gradual, slow, slight, gradual increase in rate. All right, talk to you guys next week. Hey, if you haven't done so, get on MBS Highway. You're kidding me? It's an amazing tool, so many features, and you have to be smarter than your competition in this marketplace. Just do it. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Feel the difference of what a decentralized operation makes. With account executives in your backyard and in your office, not hidden in a call center, we know what you and your borrower desires based on your market, and we'll be in your office helping you through every step of the way. Those are just a few of the differences our clients see every day with Planet Home Lending Wholesale.
This is Mortgage News Network.